Choice 2017 here on KTN News. Let's take a look at some of your feedback. Joseph Gina says, KANU is free to support Uhuru Kenyatta if he has worked to its expectations based on service to Mwananchi. Wycliffe Karori Orina on Twitter says, KANU has no option or independent mind to think on the way forward. The direction, Ibrahim Magara says, the direction of KANU takes depends on who becomes candidate for NASA since because of the personalities there. And one here says, Andrew Munove says there's a looming fallout in KANU with Gideon Moi supporting Jubilee and Nick Salat supporting NASA. One here which says, Ibrahim, that I've already read that one. Jackson says, no way KANU can support NASA. It may lose all seats in the Rift Valley. That's Alfonso Tieno says that's the only option they have. Stronghold matters. Prof, let's finish with this Deputy President William Ruto factor. How does he respond to this? He has been playing his cards very close to the chest. How does he respond to what Dr. Arya is saying?
If you look very carefully, Ruto's reference or benchmark for his political life is around the Moi family. In other words, for him to become who he has become, he has had to be a breakaway from the Moi family. While he was breaking away and consolidating the new setup, former President Moi did everything he could to try and make Gideon politically relevant. Now, on his own steam, Gideon and his team did not do very well. As a result, Ruto walked away with everything, okay? Now, when you go back to his reaction to Gideon's efforts, what you see as retired President Moi's consultation is actually on behalf of Gideon. Now, one of the things that I'm not very optimistic about is the fact that it's doubtful whether Gideon has got the stomach it takes to take on William Ruto and have a fight. William Ruto has built, as I said earlier, a lot of confidence. And he is using Moi as a prototype. He has mobilized a lot of resources. Now, what he's likely to do is that he's likely first to make an effort to recover the losses he suffered while propelling himself to the top. Then after that, he must find a way to mend fences with the people who are badly injured while he's in office.
Prof says here that he doesn't think Gideon Moi has the political capital to deal with William Ruto. Does that matter in any case?
I think you've got to understand the context in which Gideon Moi came into politics. You know, soon after his father retired as president, and then, of course, at that time, Ruto was front man for Uhuru in that failed bid in a contest with Kibaki. And then in 2007, obviously, he wasn't going to take the side of Raila Odinga because his father would have objected to that. And Kibaki was now somebody who was supposed to help the establishment reclaim its territory. He was somebody who was invited, they could trust him, but you could see in 2002, Moi bypassed him and basically said, because this is really the pact. So, and then in 2013, Mr. Kenyatta was running, and of course, Gideon's father would tell him no. So I guess if you look at the space and the opportunity around which Ruto had to play, it was because the Moi guys, it was not expedient for them to get in at that time. Because Ruto is a political animal, and he basically could spit on his thumb and put it in the wind, and whichever way it blows, he went. He could shack with Raila Odinga. He's not a political establishment guy. He's a guy, as Prof said, hugely ambitious. But the Kenyattas and the Mois are very careful about who they lend their support to and when they lend their support to. And as we know, there's a lot about an incumbency and the establishment that will support Gideon Moi to do what he has to do. And so, as Prof says, it will depend a lot on how Mr. Kenyatta manages that process. Should Gideon be the person for 2022?
All right. Before I come to Dr. Ongeti, do you think that this is, I mean, we know the Deputy President William Ruto is a political son of the retired president from the YK92 days. Has Ruto done anything to differ in terms of principle or otherwise with the retired president, or is this just a matter of choosing the real son versus the political son? What do you think about this?
First of all, we have to appreciate that William Ruto went against President Moi way back in 1997 when he vied against the then very powerful, close confidant of President, I think, Ruben Chesire, and he won that seat. And from that time, with very deep networks, very astute, smart politician, energized, as Professor would put it, he's been able to outmaneuver and outwit all his teachers, including President Moi, and then also as a student of Raila Odinga, and he had a brief stint under Mwai Kibaki. So William Ruto is a mix of all these kind of leaders, and he's been able to outwit all of them. Currently, he is also sort of a student of President Kibaki, and you've seen him maximize on that relationship to create networks, even in President Kibaki's own backyard. So it would be at all order for me to think that there is a strategy to replace. I don't think that kind of strategy obtains. I also want to believe that President Kenyatta has benefited immensely from that particular relationship that exists between himself and the Deputy President, because the Deputy President has almost done the what you'll call kazi ya mkono, the donkey work of managing politics. He's the guy who almost at his own expense fights off or wards off any opposition from any other quarters. So you would also want to establish the strength of the Deputy President, especially in Rift Valley, when you want to check how he has been able to perform in terms of the number of candidates who are now coming up in the Jubilee strongholds. You would find that there is a ward which would most likely have like 23 aspirants in Jubilee and just one in KANU, and that is something that we want to look at when you are looking at the Deputy President. So he's not just somebody you are going to maybe wish away, and I don't think anybody is wishing them away. Perhaps I would also want to comment something in terms of support of the Moi regime as well as President or Kenyatta and so forth. The truth of the matter is that they could be choosy in terms of whom they support, but in this particular case, I wouldn't want to read so much into it. Perhaps what the Kenyatta family would be looking at is to ensure that they have the Moi support going into the 2017 elections.
All right.
Now, there is also an angle that is important to consider. When you look at Ruto against versus Gideon, you're talking about merit against privilege. Ruto is a product of hard-earned political engineering. Gideon is a man of privilege. Uhuru is a man of privilege. So when it comes to having a fight out there in the field, all right, Ruto has got foot soldiers, all right? This other group has got palace cohorts, people who are looking for favors through that channel. Now, one of the things that we must consider when looking at Ruto vis-a-vis the Kenyatta effort to get Moi to support them, Moi, however hard he works, just imagine that the Mzee is not there tomorrow. Will Gideon be able to galvanize the people that Mzee was hoping would support him to retain relevance? Two, when you look at Ruto, he's been able, in an extremely astute manner, to make mistakes and survive those mistakes.
All right.
He's made many political mistakes and survived them. So in terms of the toolkit that will determine what happens between KANU, Jubilee, and NASA, at the moment, for historical reasons, the Moi group will throw in the towel with the Kenyattas. That is, if you look at it, the combinations between the triangle, the Kenyatas, the Mois, the Nyachais. When you go, for example, when I talk about privilege, when you go to Kisii, Charles Nyachai is also part of the privilege group. Politically, he's not been able to pick up the pieces, just like Gideon. He's not been able to pick up his father's legacy and move it forward. So for the time being, the position is very clear. It is unlikely, because of Moi's presence, that KANU will go to NASA.
All right.
It is likely to remain with Jubilee.
All right.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said KANU is dead, Dr. Awiti. Which scenario, NASA or Jubilee, would be most beneficial for KANU to emerge with something going to this election?
I think the risk-free path for KANU is actually with Jubilee, because then Gideon Moi is not putting himself out there in contest. NASA is too crowded, and they'll put him the back burner. But with Jubilee, I think what happens is that he will probably be the only member of the coalition, should there be anything of that kind. He's the only major party that has come to support Jubilee Party going forward. So if you're talking about a partnership of two, and you're talking about any political arrangements, he himself has basically said that the reason why Jubilee enjoys a majority in the Senate is because KANU threw in with Amani and with UDM, and that kind of galvanized it. So he can still make those kinds of claims. But I think one of the things that, from what Prof has said, it is very difficult for these guys, usually coming straight off the bat of their father's death or retirement, to show any political prominence or capability. The same with Uhuru. He was a completely useless guy in the beginning. And that's why you had Kibaki, you had Koigo Wamwere of all the people, you had Matiba basically straddling the central Kenya landscape. Until Moi said, Kenyana Munamuona Niuyu, and this is the guy. The same thing with Gideon. It takes a long time. His father is still alive, and usually it's with the enabling of the state and, of course, the political goodwill in the establishment that props up these people. So I think Gideon, just like Uhuru, when the time comes, I think a lot of people will be surprised. And the same thing with Nyachai. These are colossal human beings. And Nyachai was on this political landscape for a very long time.
Do you think that politics of dynasty is here to stay in Kenya versus the likes of Ruto trying, obviously with the help of Moi, to chart his way for his own political path? How strong is the dynasties?
Look at it this way. Read dynasty, read money. Kenyan politics is enormously expensive, okay? The people who have the kind of money to throw at this thing without going bankrupt after that, Kibaki was extremely broke when he ran in 2002. He didn't have money, and his friends used to say that. Matiba basically killed his businesses. The only people who can sustain a presidential run and still wake up the next day, the people who have the kind of money that you can throw at politics in a vicious, vigorous, sustained way, is only these two families, the Kenyatas and the Mois. Their pockets are so deep that even if you take Ruto to throw his money at this thing, they'll spend him out. So these dynasties is not really about the names. It is about the enormous wealth that they have acquired and the kind of money that they can throw at the political process without hurting their financial bottom line.
That's really the reason why you see it's through monopolization of state resources that all these big enterprises have been built, political enterprises.
Yeah.
Now, Ruto is using exactly the same path to say, it doesn't matter what the rules say, I am going to do whatever it takes to mobilize and monopolize. That's the only way I can reasonably and throw a decent challenge towards these guys. In addition, if you look very carefully, the Kenyan public, the voting public, all right, are those resource mobilizers. It's unfortunate, but it's a culture established by Kenyatta, escalated by Moi, and now there is an attempt to escalate it by Ruto, so that there is a tendency to create an impression that the people who go to the opposition are commoners. These are the ordinary people.
And that mentality, you think, will never go away?
No, it will take time.
All right.
It will take
I
time.
want to ask you, gentlemen, as we wind up, would you say there is an imminent break or split in KANU with Nick Salat seeming very comfortable with NASA, and if Gideon Moi says that KANU will go Jubilee way, is there any imminent split, Dr.?
Well, I think like just we say, Kenyan politics is very fickle. It is really difficult to analyze these things because the personalities are unpredictable. Some of them don't have a track record, and the politics is not based on ideology. For instance, why would Nick Salat throw with Raila Odinga and the NASA crew? And why would he stay with Gideon Moi? And as Prof asked, ideologically, what is the problem with the thing with Gideon and Ruto? Is Ruto opposed ideologically to Moi, or is it just because, as you say, is it a first son, a political son versus biological son? So I think Nick Salat basically will have to either go with Gideon or basically go his own way, in which case he runs afoul of the Ruto machinery in Rift Valley in combination with Gideon, and he is cast into the political wilderness. So he really has to, if he wants to sustain himself in politics, because they have the resources to sustain him, et cetera, and 2022 is looming, so he has to make a very hard decision. How does he want to spend the next 5 years after 2017?
Do you see a split?
No, I don't see a split because, one, Nick's father, Mheshimiwa Salat, used to be a personal assistant to Moi. So the existence of Nick Salat in KANU is like an attachment to an umbilical cord. Secondly, from a resource perspective and from a community mobilization perspective, Nick Salat doesn't have the resources to mobilize a group of Kipsigis away from KANU, because the Kipsigis who are with the KANU are actually exercising their relationship with the senior Moi. So I don't see a split at all. In fact, if Salat attempts a split, it will be political suicide.
All right. So bottom line, gentlemen, like we told you before, KANU has postponed that National Executive Council from tomorrow to Thursday, where the chairman, Gideon Moi, will be making that report, announcing which way KANU will be going. So, Dr. Ongeti, your final thought, what is your prediction? What do you see happening on Thursday?
Thank you, Ben. My prediction still remains that KANU would then decide to support Jubilee. I also foresee then a scenario where KANU becomes the party, the alternative party in Rift Valley, where sort of those candidates who are not very comfortable with the Jubilee can actually join in. In terms of Nick Salat, I think, as Prof has rightly put it, he owes it all to the KANU regime, and I don't think he will be able to move. But if he were to make that decision, you realize that he comes from the South Rift, where Chama Shinani has been having some inroads there. Perhaps he could also go that direction, but I don't foresee that happening. The thing is that the discomfort that people may want to attach, or some analysts would want to attach the joining in of Gideon Moi and creating a discomfort between the relationship that exists currently between the deputy president and the president is neither here or there for me. What I foresee is KANU finding its own footing within the Jubilee umbrella, but then they will also be negotiating for a space to field their own candidates, and perhaps that negotiation will also include allowing Gideon Moi to have no Jubilee contestant against him within Baringo, so that he goes in unopposed.
Thank you, Dr. for your prediction. We will call you back here to see what happens in the future. Prof, in 30 seconds only, what's your prediction Thursday?
I think it's extremely difficult to see KANU going with NASA. In fact, street radio has it that Jubilee has been trying very hard, because retired President Moi is very fond of Mudavadi. So he's been trying very hard to scuttle NASA so that Mudavadi can join Gideon in fighting off the efforts of William Ruto to remain dominant.
All right.
So my prediction is that
it will be Jubilee.
It will be Jubilee,
all right,
and it will be Jubilee all the way.
Thank you.
Largely because even now, KANU is with Jubilee.
Right. Thank you, Prof. Daktari.
I don't think that Gideon Moi will say anything about leaving the Jubilee's tent, if you like. I think primarily because of those familial ties, and I think partly also the political calculation that he has to make.
All right.
I think that allegiance to Mr. Kenyatta is solid. And I think what he might actually try to say is the reason why he will not support Raila Odinga and the NASA team, just to basically show that there's an ideological logical basis around
All right.
it.
Thank you so much. Dr. Alex Awiti, the Director, East Africa Institute at the Aga Khan University, governance expert here, biochemist who is very astute in politics, Professor Eri Tumbo, of course, governance and strategy expert, Dr. Walter Ongeti. Many thanks for joining us tonight. As we leave it on Choice 2017 this Monday night. Be sure to join us every Monday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Up next is Sophia Onuna with Monday Night News. Don't go too far.